let's take a look at how I installed a Yeasu radio into a Ford truck. Stick around and we'll get right to it. Real quick before we get going today, I've got to give a shout out to these guys. They're my latest patrons over on Patreon. If you'd like to help support the channel, I'll leave a link to Patreon down in the description below. So just a couple of days before Dayton this year, I acquired a new-to-me Ford F250 truck, which unfortunately, because I acquired it just 2 days before I left, I didn't have time to get radios installed. However, I was able to pick up a few things for it while I was in Dayton. I had already had my eye on the FTM500 and knew that that's the radio that I would want to install. For the antenna mount, I chose to go with a Diamond K400 NMO style mount. I've used this style in the past on my Jeep for my HF antenna and knew that it was a solid performer. The antenna that I chose was a Signal Stalk by Signal Stuff Antennas. This is the first time that I've run this particular antenna, but I've always been pleased with the other antennas in their lineup. Now, the first thing I like to do for an installation is to go ahead and get the power lead and the coax run from the engine compartment through the firewall and into the cab of the vehicle. This time was no exception. What I did was I ended up finding a penetration point that already existed. As you can see in the photo, I went around an existing rubber boot that already housed a bundle of wires. This boot was located on the driver's side just to the right of the brake booster and proved to be a pretty easy point to get access to both under the hood and inside the cab. Now, the battery is on the passenger side of the vehicle, so I ran the wires along the top channel. There's a piece of plastic there, so I ran them underneath that piece of plastic and just use tie wraps to hold everything in place. That gets both the antenna and the power lead over to the passenger side of the vehicle. On the inside of the vehicle, that penetration point was located just to the left of the brake pedal. So once I came inside of the vehicle, I did go ahead and add a zip tie just after the entry to make certain cable could not interfere while you were driving. Once it was zip tied, then it dives behind the plastic trim piece underneath the dash and makes its way toward the back of the truck. The next thing I wanted to do was figure out how I was going to mount the head of the radio. And I've got to give a shout out to today's sponsor, Lido Mounts. Lido Mounts manufactures all kinds of different radio mounts that will accommodate pretty much any type of setup that you want to put in your vehicle. Whether it's a phone, a tablet, or a radio, Lido Mounts has a solution for all of your radio mounting needs. So the first thing I needed to do was get access to the bolt that holds in the front seat. We're looking at the passenger side front seat bolt here, and it's right underneath that plastic cover. And I assumed in the beginning that just removing that plastic cover would give me enough room. Unfortunately, that proved not to be the case, and I ended up having to remove the entire plastic housing around that bolt. But once I got that removed, the Lido mount fit almost perfectly. So it was a little bit more work to get the plastic trim piece off around that seat bolt, but in the end, it was well worth the extra effort so that I had a rock solid mount. Now, the nice thing about the Lido mounts is it comes with a quick detach plate where the radio mounts. So once I slide this on, you can literally push down a tab and remove the radio head just as easily as when you were putting it on. You can see here the other side of that quick detach, and this piece attaches to the radio head with one single screw, and so far has provided a really solid mount point. The last thing on the list was to get the radio body itself mounted. Now, I chose to mount mine underneath the driver's seats. I have done that in the past in the Jeep Wrangler, where I had the 2-meter radio under the driver's seat and the HF radio under the passenger seat. I just like those solutions because it keeps the radio out of the way, and I only have the heads floating around up in the driver area. Now, I did not want to mount the radio using bolts. I just really wanted to avoid, if I could, having to screw anything into the truck body. So I purchased this 3M VHB automotive tape, and wow, does that stuff stick well. The only thing I gotta say is be fair warned and make sure you've got it exactly where you want it before you stick it down. Since I've got the rubber floor lining in the bottom of the truck, this was an ideal solution for my particular installation. Once the mounting bracket was attached to the truck, it was as simple as going ahead and connecting the power poles, the coax, and then the separation kit cable. Speaking of that, there's absolutely no reason to buy the official Yeasu head separation kit. I picked up a 10-foot Cat 5 cable off of Amazon, and it is working flawlessly and saved me about 40 bucks. After everything was attached to the radio body, I simply slid it into place. One of the absolutely genius things that Yeasu did with the FTM500 was to give it this quick detach mount where you can get the radio body in and out super easy. It allows me to be able to pull the radio in and out of the truck in less than 5 minutes. But now that the installation is complete, the radio is easily accessible from the driver's seat. It does sit on a slight angle. I installed it that way intentionally because it worked best for me. You could twist this thing. There's plenty of give in the mounting bar. So if you prefer yours to sit straight, it would be super easy to manipulate it to sit straight instead of on this angle that I have mine sitting on. So there's a look at how I installed the FTM500 in a Ford truck. If you have any suggestions on how I might improve this installation, leave it down in the comments below. As always, I appreciate you guys tuning in. Be sure to give us a thumbs up before you head off. We will see you guys on the next one. Until then, 7-3.